Can we not say that reparations is impossible? Let's be honest here. America can do whatever it wants. It built an entire nation on the exploited labor of African people. That exploited labor has created institutions, buildings, universities, intergenerational wealth. Everybody has benefited from slavery except the people who were actually enslaved. If you want reparations, it can be done. It was done for the Japanese, it was done in Europe, and it was done for people here. We can do it. Just be honest. Say you don't want to. Black Coffee starts now. Welcome to BET's Black Coffee. I'm Marc Lamont Hill, alongside the wonderful Gia Peppers, and Jameer Pond is here.
I ain't got time for you today. I ain't got
Black unity.
time.
Black unity.
I ain't got the time for you today.
We have a special guest today. He is known for making sure our stories are heard, whether it's fighting police brutality or good old-fashioned investigative journalism through the North Star Initiative. Please welcome activist Shaun King to the show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. I love it. I watched the show. It's good. That's what I say. It's engaging. It's fun, and you're able to talk about culture, but weave serious issues in there as well. So glad to be here.
That's a clip for the sizzle reel. That's a good clip for the sizzle reel.
And save.
And save, right.
So yesterday, one of the things I was just talking about, obviously, at the top of the show was reparations. And yesterday, of course, were the hearings, which were fascinating. You had 2 days ago Mitch McConnell give a press conference talking about how reparations were a bad idea, and it's 150 years ago, and America's always improving, but we can't
First
do anything
time
about
I've even
it.
heard him say the word reparations, though. Like my entire life, like that he's even having to talk about it, I think shows that the issue has moved forward in a way that I didn't even expect. Like, many of us, I didn't think that reparations were dead, but I also didn't think Mitch McConnell would have to talk about it.
Right.
And so, it shows that it's being pushed forward.
Absolutely.
You know?
That's an argument for the bill itself, right? That America's being forced to talk about it. Obviously, Sheila Jackson-Lee putting forth the bill, Cory Booker attempting to do something similar in the Senate. I guess did y'all get to see much of the hearings?
Yes, but especially Ta-Nehisi's entire read of the entire speech that Mitch McConnell had. Yeah. It was poetic, it was poignant, it was beautiful, it was important, and he broke down everything that Black people have gone through since we were brought here, enslaved here, and why exactly we deserve reparations.
Yeah, I think
that was great.
Can we take I want people to see just a little clip of it and then come back and see it.
Enslavement is theft. 250 years, Black people had the fruits of their labor stolen from them. We don't often think about Jim Crow and the era of segregation as theft, but it's theft too. If I agree to pay taxes, if I agree to fealty to a government, and you give me a different level of resources out of that tax pool, if you've given me a different level of protection, you have effectively stolen from me.
Wow.
It's just,
I love that, and I appreciate that, and I'm glad that we're fighting for reparations, but to me, I just see a very vague outline of what could happen. I think we know what the end goal is and what we want, but I feel like the steps to get in there, we're gonna have to jump through a lot of hoops because they gotta figure out who gets them first, who gets them. If you're Black, if you're white, but you're part Black, what does that look like for all people?
Well, I think that's why this type of hearing at least moves the conversation forward, and that hearing is not necessarily representative of all the work that's gone in behind the scenes to actually break the issue down. Yeah. And the thing is, we can't say that because something is hard, it shouldn't be done. Even that's what I heard from Mitch McConnell was saying, like, how do we do it? And we can break it down. There are lots of ways to do it.
Do you think we'll get it in our lifetime? Like, if they pass it, all goes well, they pass it, do you think we'll be beneficiaries of reparations?
I think it's possible. For me, the radical imagination has to get invoked, right? We have to be able to imagine a world that's not yet. If you would have asked me 20 years ago if gay marriage was something we could have imagined in our lifetime, I may have said no. Right, or at least a whole bunch of people would have said
Or even a Black president.
A Black president.
I don't even think 20 years ago people were thinking about the possibility of Barack and Michelle Obama.
20 years ago, we were thinking like that was like space age.
Right.
We would all be old when that would happen.
Right.
So that is a good point. Maybe.
Right. You just need the political will.
Right.
You just need the political will, and I think we'll get there at some point. But we have to be committed, one, to believing that we deserve a reparations.
I absolutely.
And I don't mean you, but I mean getting the general public, because there's still this idea from white people. Many white Americans, if you look at the polls, I didn't enslave anybody, therefore I don't deserve
Well, that's why
have to pay for it.
Ta-Nehisi's comments were so important. That's why his original piece in the Atlantic was so important. It's not just about slavery. Like, reparations are necessary for stuff that literally happened yesterday.
Right.
He's talking about loan discrimination, housing discrimination. Like, we're talking about police brutality and mass incarceration. Like, this is not just a conversation about slavery. It is about slavery, but it's also about everything that happened every day up until right now. And so he illuminated that in a way that elevated the quality of that hearing, because parts of the hearing were a mess.
Which parts? I was curious to know.
Well, I think it even gets to what you were saying, is that a lot of it was just nebulous and vague, and he brought a lot of specificity to the entire conversation.
Yeah.
And he just elevated the quality of it. And because it's a congressional hearing, anybody is allowed to invite whoever they want.
Right.
And so some people who were speaking weren't experts.
Right,
I went through this on Twitter yesterday because people were like, "Wow, you should have been." I was like, "Well, I'm not an expert on that."
Right.
And they were like, "Well, what difference does that?" Well, it makes a big difference. I could give general claims about why reparations make sense, but I think the thing that's going to make this make sense and get to where you're talking about is when you have the economists, when you have the historians, when you have the people who have expertise in this area that can connect those dots for us. And we have to include people from different camps. You have everything from NCOBRA, which has been a long-standing reparations group, over to the ADOS movement, which is problematic in a lot of ways, but is part of this conversation as well. And we have to be able to say all these groups have to come together and have some piece of the conversation. And I'm talking about the experts of those groups.
Right.
But I think, honestly, I feel like the most important feeling that I have about reparations is that it will equal the playing field, like wealth-wise. Like, literally, he said, well, hopefully, it'll give some more leeway, because literally the families that still, the richest white families, they made money off of the backs of slaves. Like, this is long, long, long money. And so we came here with nothing. And then you said, Juneteenth, you're finally free, congratulations. And we just celebrated it. And it was like, okay, go, figure it out. With
You're
$0
free, but not equal.
or nothing. So we literally came from nothing. We created something. But imagine if we got just some money that would help us.
I would love it.
Something.
I would love it. I want to be able to visualize a proper plan, because if we're talking about now we're talking about all black people who have been marginalized even from yesterday. Does that include my Caribbean brothers and sisters?
Well, see, that's the thing. There are rich conversations that have already taken place that say this percentage of whatever a reparations plan would be, this percentage goes to African descendants of slaves. This percentage goes to African immigrants in America, this percent, there are those types of plans that exist. Yesterday wasn't necessarily the day to drop the plan on the table, but Ta-Nehisi, I think, has made himself probably the nation's spokesperson for when we think reparations. He has articulated it so well in a way that has been relatable but revolutionary, which is hard to do. To make a hard-edged idea readable and understandable to people. And so those plans are out there. They just haven't gotten a lot of mainstream coverage.
Absolutely. We got some comments coming in from social media. Kim Ford on Facebook says, great to see Shaun King. Gwen Francis on Facebook says, good morning, Illinois. Thank you for that.
Hey, Illinois.
Facebook says, good morning from Elgin. But the point here is that people are calling from all over. We have a wide range of viewers today, partly because you're here and people are excited. And we're gonna push a little longer today, probably, because we wanna get to a lot of places with you. Man. But first, we want to have a little bit of fun. We want to see another side of Shaun King, because people only see the crime-fighting Shaun King. I want to see. We're going to do something a little different. We got a little game, all right? It's called, what's the name of this game? It's called Say What Now.
Say What Now.
Ironically.
I see what happened.
You see what I did there?
That was all the plan.
Now, the way it's going to happen is I'm going to give you a line from a song, and I need you to give me the next line of the song. But because we're not hard-hearted people, we are going to give you a hint.
I may need a dozen hints. Like, I have a terrible memory when it comes to lyrics. So I'm gonna give it my best.
Okay, do your best, do your best.
It might be comedic.
Do you?
Yay.
All right, question number one.
All right.
Question number one. The hint is the lyrics include men's names, right? That's the hint. The lyric is, that you need to complete is, I'm getting tired of your shit. You don't never buy me nothing.
Get ready to burn the sage. Burn your sage.
And your hair wrap.
All right. Yeah, okay. I know it's Tyrone, but I don't know the lyric. I don't know the lyric.
I mean, hey.
That's helpful.
Call Tyrone, you better call Tyrone. I'm not,
Right. Who sings it?
It's Erykah Badu.
There you go.
Okay.
That's at least 75%.
That's
credit.
75.
That's good.
Right.
That's
I
good.
gotta
That's good
see.
enough.
You
for
gotta
me.
see. You gotta see. The lyric is though every time you come around, you got to bring Jim, James, Paul, and Tyrone. We can't do it melodically because we get sued.
I said and.
Right.
Tyrone.
I almost went in.
And Tyrone.
I didn't say it.
I'm sorry.
You could have said, I'll give you $1 million.
And you would have never got Jim, James, Paul.
I wouldn't have gotten it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, wouldn't have
But you
gotten
gotta see. That's impressive. I'm with you.
it. All right.
So 75.
All right. This next one. The hint is shoes. The lyric is, these expensive, these is red bottoms.
All right. So I know that's Cardi.
Okay.
That's
The next line.
That's about, and I know Cardi, but I don't necessarily know the lyric.
Do you know the song name? You gotta pick up this partial credit we can.
We working with you.
Yeah, we trying to work with you.
Get some
All right.
affirmative action
I know
over
it
here.
was her first big hit
Yeah.
that she really blew up on.
Grading on the curve right
And
now.
all of my kids would know all the lyrics.
Yes.
But that's
These
about
expensive,
as
these is red,
Red
bottoms.
bottoms.
bloody shoes.
There you go.
Yeah, these is bloody
He threw
shoes.
it alive.
These-
He threw it alive.
Yo,
He threw it alive.
Bodak Yellow.
that's from Bodak Yellow.
All
Okay.
right.
That's at least that's
That's a-
C plus.
We give him an 80 on that.
80 on that.
We give him
All
an 80 on that.
Yeah.
You got a good average right now. It's
All right.
He had the cheat sheet.
I have already outperformed my own
All
expectations.
right. That's all that matters.
Your family will not laugh at you when you get home.
Just
A lot.
little bit. Right, a little bit.
Don't
A little
chuckle.
bit.
This
Yeah,
song is a
yeah.
warning. The hint is this song is a warning to men and to women. It's been 3 weeks since you've been looking for your friend.
It's been 3 weeks since
You've been looking for your friend.
Hey, that's all
that's
we
too
can
close.
do.
Too close. Too close.
See, I did need the rhythm,
Yeah.
so
Right.
I know that's Lauren.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something Call Me Again. That's about all I got right there.
Do you know the title?
Close.
Get this extra credit.
Listen, so I own this, but this was one that was almost 20 years ago.
Well, that's 21 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
We're actually
so-
looking for another one right about now.
Flag on the play.
No.
Flag on the play.
Hey, what'd I do?
No Lauren slander.
The Lauren slander must stop. It stops not on my watch.
Hey, we about to do for fall, okay? Talk about reparations.
I'm empty. What is
Okay, the next line is the one you let hit and never called you again.
Remember when he told you he was.
Hey, Lauren will sue us.
Right.
Right.
The suit will be filed late,
You're right.
but it will show up and we will all go down.
You gonna be Miss Gia
Do-wop
Peppers.
that thing.
all right.
Do-wop that thing. All right. All right, well
You
done.
did good.
That was
Decent.
You got
about it.
75.
You did not
75.
fail. You did
have
not fail.
passed
You
your
passed.
state test.
Yes, you
Yeah.
passed the final exam.
Yes.
I think if anything, it reveals I don't listen to a whole lot of music. Like I am as serious as you think I am. when it
Dang.
comes
That's actually good.
I mean, the fact that you knew what Bodak was, I can still
I'm
respect.
impressed.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's pretty
I was
awesome.
in the ballpark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now I think we can get into the conversation a little bit. And, you know, a lot of people might be confused as to what you actually do. So I'd love for you to tell our audience a little bit more about, like, what you would say you do and how you do it.
Well, that's a great question. You know, first and foremost, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, I see when I wake up in the morning, I don't see myself as a social media personality.
Right.
I see myself as a dad. I have 5 kids from preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, and college.
Wow.
So like being a dad is a huge part of my daily life. And I don't share that on social media anymore just for like safety
Safety.
reasons. So this huge chunk of my life that never really makes it to Twitter. And my wife and my kids, none of them are even on Twitter. And so there's this huge chunk of what I do and think of every day that doesn't make it. But my first job out of college was as a high school history teacher.
Wow.
I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta. Then for almost 5 years, I worked in the juvenile justice system. I was a traveling teacher. I was a part of a grant program called the Holistic Stress Control Institute, where I would travel to jails and prisons all over Georgia and teach stress control. I did that for almost 5 years. Breathing techniques, violence prevention, goal planning. And these were young men who had been convicted as adults, but were often in transitional facilities. Ooh. And this was pre-Twitter,
Right.
pre-Facebook.
Right.
And so, but it was there that I really gained a heart for the problems of mass incarceration, and kind of out of that I really kind of gained a desire to try to see what I could do to reform the system. I was a pastor for almost 15 years.
Yeah.
So I served on the staff of several churches, and I started a church in Atlanta. I was a director of communications for a charity called Global Green, and that was in 2014. And it was then that summer that Eric Garner was killed right here in New York.
Yeah.
That
Mike Brown,
John Crawford later that year, Tamir Rice, Ezell Ford in Los Angeles. And I just started writing about those issues and those stories on Facebook and Twitter. And I'd been a writer before, but I just started writing about them to my friends, and a lot of those posts started going viral.
Right.
And
why do you think they started going viral at that moment?
Well, 2014, if you look back, it's just 5 years ago, but it's a world ago.
Right.
And in 2014, most of the mainstream news organizations and papers did not have writers whose beat it was to cover police brutality, particularly from the perspective of the victims. It was kind of just a law and order type of way to follow these things. Right. So when I started writing these stories, I was writing them from the perspective of families and people who experienced it, and it just filled a niche. So I got hired by this liberal news website, Daily Kos, and then I got hired by the New York Daily News to be the senior justice writer. And so that's when I first moved to New York.
So at that moment, just I want to push forward just a little bit, because at that moment, one of the things you were known for was tweeting and posting stories of police-involved violence, police-involved shootings, etc. And one of the pushbacks people gave was, this is re-traumatizing, right?
Well, it is re-traumatizing, and to this day, it's a dilemma for me. Like, I would say, if I've shared 100 videos of police violence from 2014 until today, 95 of those were families who experienced it asking me, or their attorneys asking me, can you share this? Because we need social pressure and social momentum for the police to even talk to us. They'll come to me and say, the DAs won't meet with us, the police chief won't meet with us. And so the sad thing is, like, I hate those videos. Unequivocally, they're traumatizing for me, but I have to make this complicated decision. Will this advance the family's ability to get some measure of justice? And simultaneously, it traumatizes all of us who see it. Right. So it may help one small family, but in the meantime, it traumatizes the general audience who sees it.
Is that a price you're willing to pay? Is that a worthwhile trade-off, though, is the question.
Yeah, because
sometimes it's a qualitative decision that I make for each and every case. So every day, I get hundreds of emails and phone calls daily from people who have experienced some type of injustice. It could be workplace injustice or discrimination or police violence. And I only get to tell a tiny fraction of those stories. It's part of why we started the North Star, was to say, we need a place where we can tell all of these stories. Right. Because I can only tell but a few of them. But people's criticism is right. It is traumatic. It is horrible violence. And it's ridiculous that we even need to share them. Because here's the truth. We've never seen a video of a school shooting. We've never seen pictures of dead children who've been killed in a school. And yet there's always justice. And so that we have to share it to even scratch the surface is a problem.
And I think that is a good point, but I think a lot of people's concerns are that we're seeing so much of an influx of police brutality or police-related shootings amongst black people that people have now started to fall back and become normalized by it. But like, yo, you know, I could put up a hashtag, or you know what I'm saying, I might march, I might put up a picture on Instagram, and that sort of social justice, it's that, and then it goes away.
Right.
So
Hashtag activism.
Right.
exactly. So when you're normalized by that, how do you break free and kind of be aware without, you know, succumbing to all of that? Because I find it hard for myself. I used to be in the streets, march. It becomes overwhelming at one point when I see every day there's another black or brown kid, whether it's girl or boy, being assaulted by police. And it's traumatic.
It is traumatic, and I think though that we're just now able to look back and say, what has the Black Lives Matter movement accomplished? Like when you're in the midst of all of that, it's hard. You see so much injustice and so little justice that you miss some laws that have changed. You miss elections of district attorneys across the country who are changing the game. And that's part of why we started an organization called Real Justice, to replace horrible district attorneys who are often the primary ones that refuse to charge these police officers. What we found was, including right here in New York, that you could march and do sit-ins and die-ins. You could be the #1 trending topic, but if the local district attorney doesn't have a heart for the community,
Right.
isn't a compassionate person,
Right.
and isn't willing to cross this line and say, no, this officer needs to be held accountable, then it'll never happen. And so now our organization has helped elect 12 district attorneys across the country. We're fighting for a new one in Queens next Tuesday, Tiffany Caban, an amazing woman who's running to be not only the first woman ever elected, but the first woman of color in Queens to be DA. And she would change the entire system. And so, you know, I think that these videos played a fraction of causing us to all be aware of the magnitude of the problem. And the Black Lives Matter movement took that and ran with it. And we're starting to see some of these changes come about. Like, I'm not even sure that without the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm not sure that we get Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm not sure that we get Ilhan Omar. Like, a movement of activism, which was primarily driven by black people, ushered in kind of a national movement that brought in a lot of change. And so it is disturbing. But, you know, I think just this past week we saw a horrible video, you all talked about it, in Phoenix.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was so appalling, and thankfully no one died, but it was still problematic.
Yeah.
But the presence of that video will be the only reason that family gets any measure of justice whatsoever.
Sure.
So true.
Without it, we wouldn't know. It happened on May 27th.
Right.
The video came out almost a month later, but that video has now given them the leverage they need to get some measure of justice and compensation for what they experienced. But
You talked about moving, because you talked about starting an organization, you talked about starting a church. One of the critiques of you is that you're good at creating stuff, good at building stuff, and good at fundraising for stuff. But then somewhere between the conceptualization and the execution is a gap.
oh, that's true. That is probably the best criticism of me that somebody could offer. Like, I'm a natural starter. I've been fundraising my entire life, and so I know how to pitch an idea. I have struggled up until the past 2 or 3 years to figure out how to start something, grow it, and maintain it. And the organization that we started, Real Justice, is probably the best thing I've ever been a part of. We started that in 2016. It's growing, it's vital, and the main reason it's so successful is I don't run it. Okay. Like, I have a very limited skill set, and it's taken me, I turned 40 this year, it's taken me almost 40 years to realize that if there are 100 skills a person can have, I have 2 of them. And when I try to do the other 98, there's some I do okay, some I'm all right with, and there are 70 things that I'm gonna bomb on. I have to figure out a way to do the 2 or 3 things I do well.
And those 2 things are fundraising
Well, I mean, there are a couple of things. Fundraising and getting people connected to an issue.
Right.
Let me ask you the fundraising part, because one of the challenges, another critique is people say there's a lack of transparency with the fundraising. Some people when you're fundraising for families or fundraising for an organization, they say when the organization doesn't work out successfully, or there's something happens, that somewhere along the line there's some lack of communication, some lack of transparency about where the money goes, and the accusation is that you're keeping it.
Yeah, which is a lie. Like, first and foremost, when people say that, that's a crime. Anytime I've raised money for a family or for a cause, if I kept 50 cents of that money, I have committed a felony. Like, you are not allowed to raise money for anything and pocket it on the low or do it. Anytime I've raised money, I've always had 2 or 3 other full-time jobs myself. Almost every dollar I've ever raised goes directly to the families themselves. When I've raised money for organizations, I'm not even managing that money. Like, I have never, in the 5 years of this movement, I've never even had access to a dollar that I've raised.
So why does this dog you? Like,
no, I think I know, and I have to push through it. I am literally the most visible fundraiser within, not only just within the movement, but even in this time. Like, I've raised over the past 5 years over $30 million. And so what you see me every day raising money for causes, for families, for campaigns. And so what that does is it puts me in a spot of visibility. And I say it like this: I have failed more than most people have tried. And so the thing is, you see me fundraising for something and say it fails. Well, that's not theft. That may be something that just doesn't succeed.
Right.
And people have to understand, in the age of Donald Trump, if I didn't account to the IRS and to state tax agencies for every dollar I raised, I would already be indicted. Right. And so I feel I have peace about it, and I feel good about the people that I've helped along the way.
So another criticism that people have made claims on you is that you're not authentic, because people think that you are not black and happen to be white. And you dominate spaces that happen to be predominantly black and lead these causes, but people have seen pictures and seen articles about you. And
was it Breitbart that started that?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it was.
Yeah.
It was when this lie came out that I was a white man pretending to be black. Literally, Steve Bannon was the chairman of Breitbart.
Right.
The person who advanced that lie, Milo, who was one of the lead writers at Breitbart, has literally since been expelled from every social network.
Right.
I was 35 years old by the time this lie came out. Like, I didn't even see it coming.
Right.
Like, my story of my family and racial background wasn't a secret. Like, this was something I had shared my entire life. I told this story from stages. But the truth is, because I am who I am, because I look how I look, there are doors that are open to me that sometimes shouldn't. Like, there are privileges and platforms that I get that, and that's for a lot of reasons. It's one, because I'm a man.
Right.
There are times that I get an opportunity as a man where there might be a woman who's more qualified, but someone offers it to me, and I have to ask myself, well, how do I handle that?
Yeah. So what do you do in moments like that?
Well, one, you have to be willing to put in the work. Like, here's an example. I was on a panel recently, and I learned that on that panel, it was just a panel of 3 people. I was offered significantly more money than the other 2 women who were on the panel.
We just talking about
And
this.
I literally had to tell my agency that, hey, I will not be on panels where I am unnecessarily compensated more than the other experts on the panel.
Right.
And people can cloud that and say, well, it's because I have this number of followers. But what we see all over society is that men are paid more than women, even when all skills are equal, or even when women have more skill. And so I try to correct it. It's about being aware of it. I've talked like, there is this degree of even like light skin privilege and accessibility. Like, because I look how I look, that makes me more relatable to white people in white spaces. So what I have to do, if I have some level of relatability that I didn't choose, I was born with it, I have to use it. I have to squeeze it. I have to maximize it. And so that's what you see with like mega woke light skinned people, you know, like.
I just said that.
Y'all go hard, man.
I said that.
Well, then the flip of that is, and I mean, I had Colin Kaepernick and I have talked about this at great length. Because we grew up in the families we grew up in, we also grew up in close, intimate proximity to white people and white problems. And so we saw it and we understand it in a way. And so we're trying our best to use it. But I get the criticisms. I try to empower other voices. I try to amplify other voices. But sometimes good people are amplified for reasons that they didn't deserve.
When you think about, and I know we got to go, but I want to steal just a few more minutes with you because there's some things that I do want to cover. Just one, because we have people on social who are writing in as well. In fact, let me go to them for a moment. Kim Ford is on Facebook and says, it's traumatizing, but we wouldn't even know some of these injustices if Shaun doesn't post it. Ty Battle says, please don't get sued. We need this show. No, Lauren Hill ain't gonna sue us. We good. We good.
Sorry, Lauren.
Just kidding, Lauren. But on a serious note, I mean, one of the things that you talked about is the fact that you're very visible and very public, and as a result, you're more of a target. One of the ways you responded to the target back earlier this year was you wrote letters to people who were accusing you of things or defaming, I think was the language you used, and you threatened to sue people if they didn't delete certain tweets or certain accusations about you. Is that a fair characterization?
No, that's accurate. You know, a lot of people, including myself, thought that was the best way to handle that. Like, it started where multiple people posted complete fabrications. They said that I had raised money for a young woman who was incarcerated, Centoya Brown, who was jailed in Tennessee, and that I had raised money for her, and they wanted to know, like, when was her family going to get that money? And it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I said nothing about it, and I didn't respond. And eventually, multiple journalists started writing me and saying, like, hey, you're gonna have to answer to us about why Centoya Brown's family doesn't have this money. I thought it was a joke. Not only did I not keep money for Centoya Brown, I never raised it. And when I confronted people who had posted this saying I kept money, like, if I did what they said I did, I would deserve all the scorn that I was getting. But I never even shared the link. I didn't even know there was a GoFundMe for her.
So we're stipulating you didn't do this, right? That the accusations were wrong. The response to threaten people with legal action, as someone who's fighting the criminal justice system, can you see the
well, let me tell you the hard lesson I learned, and I apologized to people privately and publicly. It's the difference between intention and impact. My intention, I think, was pure. My intention was, I have to defend myself and defend my reputation, because what people are saying I did is not only false, it's criminal. Like, and you have to fix this and delete it. That was my intention. The impact, so I'm responsible for my intention, but we're also responsible for our impact. The impact was that it caused the people who posted those things to be harassed by tens of thousands of people. Now, some people say, well, Shaun, they deserved it because they posted a fabrication. I don't believe that myself. My intention was to right a wrong, but the impact was it not only ended up doing me more damage, it also damaged the people who made the accusations in a way that I don't feel good about.
Clarissa Brooks is one of those big voices that I think said, "Hey, I'm being targeted now."
Well,
and as a black woman, there's the issue of black women already being targeted by the criminal justice system.
And you know, Clarissa posted that I had stolen this money from Centoya Brown, and you know, ultimately, the way I handled it did her harm, and that's why I say you're responsible for your intentions. So a lot of times people will say, hey, but that wasn't my intention.
Right.
But you're responsible for your impact as well. And so my intention was right, but the impact that it had, I don't feel good about that. And
Did you apologize to her?
I did, yeah. I apologized to her directly, like directly to her privately, and I apologized to her publicly. Now, she rejected it and said she didn't want it, didn't accept it, and I have to leave that saying, you know, I did my best.
Yeah.
And if I had it to do all over again, I would handle it differently. I have to understand that some people are going to post fabrications, and I just have to ride through that.
Yeah.
And I was trying to fix and correct the record, but it ultimately did me and others more harm than I wanted.
Yeah.
You know?
We
And-
do have to wrap right now because we are going to do the refill.
Yes.
Good.
So you're sticking around.
Yeah.
You guys stick around on Twitter, Mark?
Yeah, we have more questions and more comments. Stay with us. Black Coffee is done for this part, but you can continue to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You can subscribe on YouTube, and make sure you watch us every day live, weekdays, 10 a.m. Eastern. But right now, we're going to go over to Twitter and have a conversation. It's called Black Coffee, the Refill. Shaun is going to hang out with us. We're going to have more questions, more comments, more quotes from you. Stay with us. We'll be right here.